Welcome back to Carolina Saltwater Living, y'all. Now go over our 24 by 36 metal building with a 10 by 25 lean-to. Now break down the cost on it, y'all, in case you are in the market for a metal building of your own. Tell you where this one came from. Give you a few insights that maybe some other people don't have for you. Thanks for stopping in. Let's get into the deets. All right, first off, 36 feet long. That's the length of the main portion of the building. Technically it's 35 because you have 6 inches of overhang on the front and the rear. It is a true 24-foot wide building though, with 10-foot manual roll-up doors. Our install crew did a fantastic job. There is not a single hole in this building that shouldn't be there. They even wiped away the chalk lines. As they were working, they chalk lined everything where the screws had to go to make sure that they were hitting steel instead of hitting air. And then they would come back with a rag and wipe all the chalk line away. So they ended up leaving me with just a beautiful building, y'all. Clean, ready to move into. Every bit of this is seamless metal. It's all cut to length at the factory for your specific building. There's some trim work that gets done when you're out here as far as, trimming all of your trim along the roof line, the sides, all that gets cut to length while you're out here, if you can see that. It's 12-foot sidewall, y'all, so it's a pretty tall building. But everything is perfect. There is not a single blemish on this entire building, and I know that because I was out here for 16 hours with them. That's how long it took to erect this structure, 16 hours. And I provided cleanup the entire time that the build was going, and I helped where needed because there were 3 men that came. And it was windy to start with, so it really took a 4th man. But these guys are pretty tough to be able to do it with 3. But they were grateful I was around to provide that extra helping hand. So as you can see, we do not have concrete inside the building. I'll explain why in a few minutes. But if you look right here, you'll see mobile home anchors with a grade 5 steel bolt running through the frame of the building. And that mobile home anchor. It's a 3-foot deep mobile home anchor. And there are 3 of these on each sidewall of the interior of the building. So 3 of those mobile home anchors, 3-foot deep on each side of the building, as well as rebar on every single section in between your trusses going down through here. 3-foot rebar, and it is bigger than 1/2 inch. I didn't put a tape on it, but it's pretty stout stuff, and it's made like a nail head. So they come through with a large sledgehammer and drive those into the ground. And the tool used to put the mobile home anchors in, y'all, it probably weighed 100 pounds. And so I actually helped Pedro, the crew boss, with that, installing these because it's so heavy, and it was just better working with 2. But it is a stout securing to the ground, y'all. And that's important to us because we live less than 1/4 of a mile from the ocean waves. And so we know that when hurricanes come in and they bring that wind, we've got a nice building that's secure to the ground, has a good foundation. Every single upright in here, the trusses, every one of them were built on the ground. Now, they were formed at the factory, but the finishing touches were put on them here on the ground and then stood up one at a time once the frame rail around the base was installed and secured. And every single upright that went in had a level on it, a magnetized level. That way they could tell what was true. The crew also used a transit laser in the center of the building to mark their heights, and you may actually see some of those marks with pencil on the frames here, and you may be able to make that out. But that was so that they could get one true mark and make sure that the rest of these trusses were all set at the same height. And the way these buildings are made, the frames, there's about 6 inches along the base rail that sticks up, that your truss unit slides over on top of. And if you've watched the time-lapse video, you should have been able to see that process taking place. But they did not have to use any of that wiggle room because the pad was already level. I think it was 1/4 of an inch out is what the crew boss told me. And that's not bad for such a decent sized pad done with the excavator here and a laser transit. 1/4 inch over this entire span is nearly perfect. So they were very happy they didn't have to shovel anything to get this site ready to install, because they'll tell you that it needs to be within 4 inches front to back, side to side, in order to get this building level, because they can level but so much because of the 6 inches of play they have on those base foundation rails when they're raising and lowering trusses to get them at the right height. But they didn't have to do that on this case because it was level already. So I've watched a bunch of videos on buildings while we were preparing to find our building, to kind of get, you know, ideas of what we wanted, companies we may not want to go with. And we did a lot of due diligence before we ordered this building from Boss Buildings out of Elkin, North Carolina. Now, the way Boss explained it to me, they work in partnership with North Carolina carports and garages. They actually have a stake in the manufacturing process. And that is a reason that this building may have been more affordable than others. I can tell you that it did come in at the best price on the 3 companies that we priced with. Dealers is what they are, y'all. Boss is a little different because they have some ownership in the manufacturing process. That makes them, if you want to call it like a preferred dealer, that would probably be a way to go with it, because they actually, they're not just a dealer, not tied to the manufacturing facility. They actually have some ownership in it. So we saw a lot of horror stories. Uprights not level and square, roofs leaking, bowed out bulging walls. Our installer told us a lot of the companies are using jackleg installers, and that's the way I know to put it. When we went with Boss, I wanted to know how long they had been in business and how long the crew that would be coming out to our place had been working with them. Well, it was easier to find out the length of operation of Boss. Over 14 years, I was told by our sales lady, and it just so happened that the crew that came out to do ours has been installing for that long or longer. So they had this thing down to a science. Crew had worked together for quite a while. So everything went perfect. But what the installer told me, he said, we only make 20% of the cost of your building. That's what we get paid to install. And so a lot of the crews are going to cut corners any way that they can just to throw something up and get on to the next one. Not so with the crew that we had. I think that a lot of the horror stories are due to bad crews. And if there are that many bad crews, then whatever company you're dealing with needs to nip that in the bud and move on from those people, so that they're not having a whole bunch of backlash over bad buildings put up. But we are fortunate that through Boss and a good install crew, this thing's perfect, y'all. Everything is perfect. We went with a single bubble installation on the roof, mainly for condensation purposes. I didn't want it raining inside of the building. I've had a metal building before, a Kwanzaa hut style, and it dripped all the time, especially in the humidity down here in the south. No dripping in here whatsoever. Even the sidewalls haven't dripped. And I think that's because these buildings are not airtight. And so there is some breathing going on, and that has prevented any type of condensation buildup on the sidewalls. Zero up top because we have that basically a moisture barrier up there. I would definitely recommend going with at least a single bubble. That's what our sales lady recommended, because that's what she had in her building that she's had for 2 or 3 years now and has had no issues whatsoever, because you're not looking for an R factor. You're looking for a moisture barrier. So the day after we got this thing up, I come down with the flu, and so that's why you hadn't seen any videos from us in about 2 weeks. It's been taking a little bit to get over it. Into the details of the building though, as far as pricing goes. We upgraded our package to 14 gauge steel for our trusses, all of our side supports and trusses. It's basically everything that you see here is considered a truss, even down to the base plate. It's one unit, welded together and screwed together. We upgraded to 14 gauge because I knew that we're in hurricane prone country, and I wanted stronger sidewalls with a 20-year rust through warranty. 12 gauge does not give you the strength nor the longevity as far as like rust prevention goes. And one thing our installer told us was, you're fortunate you went with the company you did because they're honest as far as the gauge of steel they actually send you. He told me from his experience working for other dealers and other manufacturers that a lot of times they'll tell you they're sending you 14 gauge unless you got a set of calipers and you're putting it on it and don't know any different. They will actually send you out 12 gauge beefed up 2x2 like this tubing to look like 14. But having been around this enough in my life, I know from experience what 12 and 14 looks like, and putting a handy set of calipers on there just proves it. Make sure that you're getting what you pay for before they even drive the first piece of metal into the ground or start working. Before they unload, make sure you're getting what you pay for. The 14 gauge on all of our framework, our trusses, 29 gauge on the roofing material, the siding roofing material. Did that because I knew I'd have the strength from the 14 gauge in the frame, and with a little bit thinner metal on the walls and roof, I knew that if we did have that major storm, I wanted the sheet metal on the outside to give before my trusses did. And so that's kind of my thought process on going with that. Could have gone with 26 gauge for the sheet metal versus 29, but there really is no sense. Y'all, this thing is solid as a rock. Once they tie everything together between all of your purlins, your trusses, your uprights, screwing all the metal to it, y'all, it is a stout building when they're done, especially if they've taken the time to level everything up and make sure everything's square like our crew did. All right, other details on the building: 10 foot roll-up doors, 2 of them on the front. Manual, y'all. Nothing fancy here. This is a glorified tractor shed to keep the excavator, the tractor, and any other storage that we end up building this out for in the future, as far as racks and things like that that we probably will put in as time goes on. Plus the carport on the other side for Lisa's truck. I've already got a box blade, some excavator buckets over there, but just a storage on the outside there as well as on the inside. But as far as the pricing goes on this building, let me get into that. So wherever you live at is going to depend on your pricing. We're 5 hours from the factory where this thing was manufactured. So the install crew didn't have that far to go in the scheme of things, because they told me they go as far away as New York to put these buildings in. $11,085. That's our total into this building price. That was the building itself and the install. Like I said, they told me 20%, the install crew, is what they get paid for the building, for the install portion of it. So that's included in your price. $11,085. Now, that doesn't include the $485 we spent to the county for a permit. That doesn't include the grading for this. Didn't have to do a ton of grading. It took me about a half a day, but I do that for a living, so that's a cost that I technically didn't have to put out of pocket. But if I were going to be doing this simple pad for somebody else with soil that was already on site, not having to bring dirt in, things like that, $500 or $600, y'all. That is the easy one to do. We didn't go with concrete because, like I told you, it's a glorified tractor shed for us. If I need to get on the ground, and I will, to change oil and things, I'll throw down a horse mat that you can pick up at Tractor Supply for probably $50 or $60 and put my creeper on it. I don't plan on spending a whole lot of time on my back anymore doing work, but it's nice and level in here. It's sand. If we ever wanted to hog it out and put in concrete, Lisa and I could do it ourselves. We've done it before. I've done concrete work in the past. I know how to do it. So if we ever want to pour one in here, we can do it in the future, but I really don't foresee a need for us. If this were going to be like a mechanic shop and you're going to run your business out of it, and you're going to want true insulation in here, not just some, condensation barrier up top, you're going to want concrete. You're going to want all these things. The price of your project is going to go way up. I'd go ahead and expect, just for a good rule of thumb, probably about 50% the cost of your actual building is what your concrete is going to cost. So keep that in mind if you are planning for these things. If you're wanting concrete, I'd suggest find you about 3 reputable contractors in your area and get bids from all of them before you ever get a building bid. And these installers told me they love putting them up straight on the dirt because so many people have pads poured and they're improperly done, and they don't have a ledge around the edge for the actual foundation beams to go down on, and then they have to chisel out a bunch of concrete by hand just to make the metal fit, because it actually goes below your bottom rail about 1.5 inches. And we actually went around, I don't know if you could tell in the time lapse, I actually went around with a hoe and hogged out all around the exterior so that that metal could go beyond the actual base frame by about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. And that just gives you basically a barrier on the outside from snakes, things like that, mice. You're going to have stuff get in here. It's not, the way this building is, this glorified tractor shed, there's an air gap at the base of the 10-foot doors. And there may be more, because depending on what I need in the future, it may be too tall. I may have to do some cutting out with the excavator to let something get in that's a little bit taller than our 10-foot doors, but no big deal. But plan on these things ahead of time before you order a building. If you want concrete, or if you want gravel, whatever you want, make sure you're putting that into your budget and not just going with the price of the building, because there's more fees involved. So I told you that $11,085 was the total package price, not a dollar more. $485 is what we gave to the county for our permit. Still waiting on final inspection. Haven't called for it because I had the flu and just didn't want to deal with it. So, and also a foundation survey we had to do here in our county. Kind of backwards, they want you to put the building up, then have a survey done to make sure you're within the tolerances that the county has set for you. In our case, it's 5 feet from the property line. We are well over that, so we're good to go. Survey's been done, just waiting on it to show up. And then I'll call and get the final inspection done. Probably a couple more $100 for the inspection fee. And I'm not sure what the foundation survey is going to cost yet, because I haven't received the bill, but I'm guessing probably between $500 and $600. If I'm wrong on that, I will let you know. So all in all, y'all, we're very happy with the structure that we put up. We feel like it was a good bargain for what we needed it for. Something to secure the Kubota equipment, anything else that we need to secure, especially if we have to leave here, travel, be gone for any amount of time. We can lock things up and not have to worry as much about something getting damaged or stolen while we are not home. It's just peace of mind too, y'all. It protects your investment. If you have equipment like we do, it's nice to have a place to get it out of the elements when you're not on a job with it. On the next video, I'll kind of go over some things that maybe I wish I had known before we got into this building process. Some other things that I've learned, so I will probably not respond to questions about things that I didn't cover in this video, just because I'd like to do one more shorter one and kind of go over some of the ins and the outs that we wish we had known before we said yes and signed on the dotted line. Guys, y'all have a good day and a great week. Lord willing, the creek don't rise and I can get over this flu. We will see you on the next one.